Hey guys, welcome back to the 11th podcast of the YTCA. As always, my name is Nick,
My name is Theo.
My name is Ezra.
and yeah, thank you guys so much for joining us once again on this beautiful Tuesday or whenever you're watching. Um, so, as always, please check out our website. That we have a lot of loads of great information and great resources that you can look up to. There's just everything is on there, and also be sure to check out our Instagram. We'll be uploading things weekly to keep you guys updated on what we're up to. And yeah, and also just go check them out. They're great. Okay, so without further ado, we shall jump into this week's topic, which is failures. Um, which I mean, honestly, I guess it's something that's very common sense to people, right? Like, oh, everyone has failed in life, right? I'm just gonna say this out there. If you said you have never failed, please email me personally because I will find something that you have failed at. I'm sorry, it's not,
Oh,
but like everyone has failed. It's impossible for you to be perfect because no one is perfect. Just be honest. So, if the question is, what is failure, right? Failure is it's not really a simple topic, right? On the surface, it's just, oh, I didn't do something well, right? But actually, there's many different types of failures, right? So what do you guys think? What kind of different types of failures do you guys see kind of in life?
I think that failure is, or at least maybe to give a general definition for failure, it's kind of when you don't, when you or, yeah, basically if you're applying it to yourself or something you did, it's when your actions or what you've done don't meet up to a certain level or standard that either you or someone else has set, and in doing so, you haven't achieved what was placed or what was desired. It can be like a very black and white, like, oh, did you get this answer right on this test? No, then oh, that's a fail. It can be black and white like that, or I mean, it can be like generally gray. Like say you try to go to the gym like every week, like 3 times a week, and then sometimes you end up only going two or even one time a week. That kind of, you could consider that a failure because you didn't live up to your goal, but it's not. We wouldn't consider that like a complete failure because you still went and you still tried to stay committed. So there are different kinds of failure.
Yeah, I definitely agree with that. Based on the definition I looked up, it's the lack of success, which it's kind of like too broad, to be honest. I agree that failure is like when you don't meet your goals or the goals people set up for you and you feel like you have to fulfill them. Or it could be something as simple as failing to communicate what you really want to someone. I mean, it's like there's a lot of, I guess, failures, and there's so many that's so hard to like give a definition to what is failure because as a society we're always constantly trying to get better, right? And trying to not fail, right, at things, because if we fail we feel kind of bad, right?
Mm, yeah, for sure.
Yeah, I think it's really important for us to recognize that success is different based on who you are, right? Success might be, I don't know, something very small, right? Let's just say, if this is just very silly, of course. If you're afraid of the dark, which I mean, I was when I was younger, right? I was afraid of the dark. Going to a dark room by myself, that actually might be something very challenging for me because I'm afraid of the dark. That's something that I struggle with, right? That if I can achieve success there, that's something really big for me, right? And some people might laugh at me saying that's silly or that's just dumb, right? Anyone can do that. Well, success is not objective, right? It's subject to different people, depending on who you ask. Right? So meaning that the meaning of failure will be different as well, right? And so I think it's important for us to first, right, to realize that failure isn't just one thing, right? Failure isn't just, oh, I didn't do this, or yeah, I this wasn't done, right? Because what you see as failure, others could see as improvement. Right? That's what we have to recognize first. Failure isn't just bad. You're bad, or you've done something bad, right? And I think that's important. I don't know. What do you guys think about that?
I think that I do agree with you that failure a lot of the time is not kind of this set standard that for everyone, right? Maybe in terms of maybe academics, you could say that, but even in academics, like certain levels and certain achievements are considered failures or successes for people. Um, but yeah, there is no set standard for what's considered totally successful and considered totally or failure, right? It's not really a clear cut line. And what's important to understand is that as a person who sets their own goals or who has certain goals in mind, understanding where those goals are, is understanding your capabilities is all important into taking into account what you should consider failure and what you can just consider growth or consider simply um, hardship, because there is a difference between like failure from there is a difference between self failure and failure because of like some kind of unfortunate event or circumstantial failure basically.
Yeah, I definitely agree with you on that. Circumstantial failures, like it depends on the circumstances, right? Like, what do you call a failure? Like, what your standards are. Another thing is that I think failure can be kind of categorized into two big ones. Like, there could be failures that don't bother you at all. Like, oh, I failed to, I guess, get enough sleep. I mean, it may not bother you that much. And then there's failures that, really hurt you. Like, oh man, I did really bad on this math test and I felt that I should have studied a lot more. Or I really failed because I offended like my best friend. Like, I feel really bad about that. So yeah, if there were any two general categories I would give to failure, it's those two.
Speaking of circumstantial, how failures are, very, very depending on the context and the situation that you're in. What are some examples that you guys have came up with? What are some of the things that you guys have experienced through your life? For me, I think one of the things for me was, I guess, more of a. I'm gonna talk about. I think one of the biggest things that people don't really. A lot of people don't really see this, but I think this is still failure. It was what I call, or a lot of us call, the Christian failure. I think during many of my years, right? Because I was a Christian ever since I was 6, and I actually feel like I felt disconnected from my Christian faith during the 6th and 7th grade. Well, maybe 5th, 6th, and 7th grade years. And those years I did not seek God, and I did not try to live a good Christian life. And you know what? That was a failure because I failed to make a connection to my faith. Right. So that I would consider that a Christian failure. And um, and something else that I think what is a failure is, um, you know, in actually this is pretty funny because for those of you guys who knows me, you know that I'm not usually a person to kind of take something like meh and just go with it. I'm a little bit of a perfectionist to a certain extent. So yeah, that's who I really am. But that actually was very different when I began middle school. I actually failed a lot in 6th grade. If you can't, I think back then I would just used to like pretty much make up things for projects and just pretty much do everything last minute because I didn't care. Like I feel like I just didn't care. Right? I think and I failed a little bit academically because I just didn't care. Right. So that's another failure that I had in life. Right. And I think a big part of this, I recognize my failures. I'm not perfect. I have to come to terms with it. Right? If you don't come to terms with it, if you think you're just all up there, right? If you're just all good, you're never going to be able to learn. You're never going to be able to realize what you have done. That's just kind of two of my examples from my life. How about you guys? I kind of want to hear what you guys have to say about that.
I guess I'll share something kind of funny. I have these failures in music, which are kind of like a little bit embarrassing. There's this one time when I was playing in a concert. I'm actually a clarinetist in there, and it was like at a really fancy concert hall, okay? So I was playing this piece, and then suddenly in the middle, my mouth gave way. And if you know what that happens, you actually make a squeak on clarinet. So I squeaked like in the middle of the performance. It was like a really official performance, okay? And then it felt like I failed everyone there because I like you could hear it and it was like it kind of sucked.
Yikes.
So yeah, another failure is that it's like I actually played at another concert and this time I didn't come on time. So that was like that felt worse, but you know, it's just that
Oh,
I've experienced failure like several times in music, and I'm still playing music though because I mean I really enjoy music. So if you enjoy something, like even if you fail at it, like you'll continue doing it.
I think that brings up a really good point on kind of perspective, because what you may consider failure, kind of what we talked about earlier, what you may consider failure might not be such a big of a deal to other people, or might not be considered such a big of a deal to God. I think, yeah, in the case of like your clarinet playing, I'm sure that you considered like your slip up to be a major failure of like the concert, but I think at least to most of the audience and probably most of the players there, I think they were at least sympathetic for you. That it didn't really change that much of the concert. It's not like it destroyed anything or stopped the concert from going on. Or at least that's what it sounded like. I don't know if anything worse happened, but so I don't think, and that's I think, yeah, when taking into account perspective, it's important to see that we kind of tend to make big deals out of generally small things. Yes, it is important to perform well. Yes, it is important to try and do your best. But oftentimes, when we quote unquote fail, it can be, um, it can actually be much more minor than we make it out to be. I know for me personally, I used to play the violin, right? And so, what you want to, I know, if you've ever played music, kind of the fear of auditions. Auditions are this tense kind of moment where you're trying to play your best, but you're gonna play your worst, and like it's really hard to play well during auditions. At least for me, because I get really nervous. So one time I had been practicing really, really hard for an audition because like I wasn't the best at violin, but I felt like I was getting better, so I wanted to push myself. So I was practicing really hard. And when we got to the audition, like it was just so there was like all the teachers, all the people who were there, they were really nice to me. My mom was really nice to me and like encouraging me. But like the pressure I put on myself kind of made me like I didn't even play like that terribly. I sped up a little bit during like one of the sections, but otherwise I think I played okay. Um, but like afterwards, I remember crying because like I thought I played so bad. I thought I had failed so miserably. And like even though like I played really well, and actually that audition actually was the first time I was elected from the second violins to the first violins. In orchestra, that's like a big moment where if you're in the second violins, that's like the lower election of violin, and then if you're in first violins, that's like the high tier, right? So like moving from second to first was like a big deal, and like I played well enough to where I was able to move up, but at the moment, I thought I had played so terribly. I thought I had failed. And because of that, like, I didn't handle it well. And I think that just speaks a lot about how perspective and understanding, that the way we look at things isn't always the most clear, isn't always the most objective, is important to understanding both what is failure and also how to deal with failure, um, which I think is important to understand in life.
Wow, that's a good know actually. That was very inspirational, honestly. I mean, first of all, I'm glad you got first chair, which no, I'm glad, I'm glad.
Well,
Um,
not first chair, first violins.
oh yeah, sorry, first violin. I'm glad. You know,
Yeah.
we work hard for it. But honestly, I think that's so true. You know, um, it's the idea, right, of putting everything into perspective. Right. I mean, I think context and perspective is always important, but in terms of failure, it's very, very important. It's crucial, right? Um, so you know, sometimes you can't be looking at the failures alone. You know, talk to people around you; they might see it different, right? You know, see failure. The thing about it is you have to see failure not as you know an intention, not as something or like something or like something you're trying to deliberately fail at, something you're deliberately trying to be bad at, right? Because I think most of us, right, when we're making mistakes, aren't deliberately trying to fail something. Because I think that's a different type of mistake if you're trying to deliberately fail. But I'm talking about more of just like trying, and in the process of trying or the process of doing something, something bad or unexpected comes along, and yeah. And as said, as we said last time, when we talked about time management and other topics as well. Sometimes unexpected things happen. You know, mistakes sometimes result in uncontrollable things, right? Or failures, right? Let's just say I don't know. If you're an actor, right, and you're auditioning for a movie, right, you might not get picked. You might get 50 agencies and you might not get picked because that is out of your hands. And you can do your best in each of the auditions, right? It is the director, right? It is the producer that kind of, oh, not the producer, the director, right, that actually picks the people, right? It is not out of your hands, right? So we got to understand that sometimes, failure to a certain extent, right, is controlled. And so that's actually a very good point to bring to the next question, which honestly I think it's a pretty difficult question to answer, but I think has a lot of aspects to it that we can really explore. The question is, to what extent is failure inevitable? Right? Can failure ever be avoided? Like, can we just like say, because I believe that some mistakes can be avoided while others cannot, right? And like, if you're given the choice, right, to live a faultless life, if you're given the choice to live a life that's basically without mistakes, you don't have to make any mistakes, would you go down that line? I want to hear what you guys think about that.
Well, I just want to share this great quote by J.K. Rowling that kind of answers your first question, whether failure is inevitable. She says, "It is impossible to live without failing at something unless you live so cautiously that you might as well not have lived at all, in which case you have failed by default." So even if you like avoid failure, you're kind of failing in a sense. And if you live a life that's perfect and without failure, that kind of destroys the purpose of success because you kind of need contrast in your life, right? If no one failed, like what really would be success, you know? Like would success be really worth it? Like that's kind of like if you don't have contrast in your life like happiness and sadness, you really don't know what which one is, right? You can't really experience one or the other. So I mean, it is like really appealing to like never fail at something. But I think it's only appealing because like we live in a world that we do fail. But if you live in a world where no one fails and yet no one really succeeds because there's no such thing as failing, like I'm not too sure about that, to be honest.
I think I think the question brings up an interesting point, I guess from the Christian perspective, kind of how we as human beings are sinful by nature, because of Adam and Eve, and so we are sinful by nature, and therefore we can't be perfect no matter how hard we try. Um, yeah, we can't be perfect, and so that's why obviously, like general Christian, the gospel is basically Jesus lived the perfect life, died the perfect death, so we could be saved, right? and I think kind of it says a lot about kind of our responsibilities as Christians, that yes, we will fail. Yes, we will fail. We will experience failure. I don't think that's up for debate. I don't think anyone's perfect, and yeah, humans are naturally sinful, but rather being able to kind of understand that we are not our failure. We are not just the collection of our failures. That we are people whom are saved by grace, people who are beyond just our mistakes, and like people who are loved by God foremost. I think is very important to understand. Um, this kind of and this also kind of, if I may go on for a little bit, is kind of the idea of, or kind of the contrast to like hate culture or cancel culture. Like people oftentimes make really big deals out of kind of a mistake that someone makes, whether it's some kind of controversial statement, whether it's some kind of actual crime that they commit, or even just something small. And people oftentimes, especially with social media and whatnot, make a big deal out of it. But in the midst of all that, we have to understand that not only are we not perfect and therefore shouldn't be judging others on their mistakes, but also that people aren't just their failures. People are complex. People are human beings with equally as complex lives, equally as complex motives and understandings of the world as you do. And I think when it really comes down to um, getting to know a person and trying to live in a society, I think it's really important to understand that you need to be able to understand that people are more than their mistakes, and that you need to see beyond that. You need to see their character, you need to see their values, why they did the things they did, and then through that you can grow. I mean, I know we're not going to cover growth through failure that much, but I think understanding failure, understanding someone's motives and values, even through their failures, because failure does speak volumes about what a person is, who a person is, can be very helpful to, forming bonds and being a better person in general.
Yeah, I think Ezra, you touched on a very good point. I think if you guys really want us to talk about more about this cancer culture, we can actually do a podcast on that because I think there's a lot to talk about with that. You know, it deals with failure and kind of kind of people's kind of psyche, right, and how people react to others, right. And so the big takeaway here, I guess, is do not let failure define who you are. You are not defined by your failure. Well, and I guess to that same extent, you can't be defined by your success either, right? So it's more of the kind of the balance, right? Do not let yourself be defined by your failures. Right? But as we will talk about next week, if you do not grow from your failures, and as I quote Albert Einstein, what is the definition of insanity? It is doing the same thing over and over again, expecting the same thing, expect different outcomes, right? If you do the same mistakes over and over again, and you expect, next time something will change, nothing will. Right? So you have to learn from it, right? If I don't know, if I trip on this, if I trip on the stairs every single day, right? Then maybe next time I shouldn't trip on it. Maybe I should, lift my foot up a little higher, right? Just the small things. Right? But honestly, I think I definitely have to agree with Theo on that question though, on the idea of you cannot live a life that's faultless. If you try to live a life that's faultless, that's just so cautious and so reserved, you're missing what life is about. Life is about unexpected things. Our life, I think, is about arbitrary things, right? That's what makes life great. Sometimes random things happen and they're funny, right? If right now the chair that I'm sitting at breaks and I fall down to the floor, yes, it would be painful. But wouldn't it be funny? It would be a little funny, right? It would be a little hilarious. See, that's where life it's interesting. Life is not just determined things. Life is a lot of random things stringed together, right? And that's what's good about it. That's what makes life really fun. And so I think all of us, we have to recognize that in the process of avoiding the faults and the process of avoiding the failures, we're actually avoiding a great aspect of life. And you're actually actively trying to avoid a learning experience. So you're basically saying that, since I don't want to make mistakes, I'm good where I am. Right? I don't want to learn anything else. Right? I just want to kind of stay in the kind of my observable area, the area that I'm comfortable with. Right? Because stepping out of your comfort zone, you'll always make mistakes when you step out of your comfort zone, right? Because you're not comfortable. Right? So I think that's really important for us to recognize. Anything else? Do you guys think you guys want to talk about that?
I think it is interesting to think about how failure in it of itself and kind of just how humans grow through failure can be for good or bad. I know because one person can interpret failure one way, another person can interpret failure another way, and that's kind of and even though both parties feel that they're growing from failure, um, there is there are polarized views that form from that. Because of that, we have conflict. Because of that, we have a lot of there's a lot of conflict in the world. I don't think that failure and just the kind of randomness of life is all good. I don't think that's something we're trying to communicate, right? Because there is a lot of sadness, a lot of terrible things going on in the world that are the result of kind of the randomness of life, the result of human failure and humans growing in the wrong way. And so that isn't to say that taking the kind of perfect life and being completely flawless is the better choice, because that's not exactly what we're trying to say. But we want to acknowledge that, or at least I want to acknowledge that failure does come with hardship, and failure does have a lot of consequences to it.
Yeah, that's a really good point. Like, let's say you accidentally killed someone. I mean, you can't like view that as not a failure. Like, come on, you accidentally took a person's life. Like, there's some things in life that you really should regard as this is truly a failure. I need to make amends for it. Like, let's say you did something really bad against someone. Like, you should make amends for it. It was like really a failure, right?
Theo,
So like we have to acknowledge that, right?
Theo, I just want to quickly, I want to ask you something about that. Actually, this is really interesting. I want to, just before we end, I wanted to ask you about that. Does context matter there? Do you think context matters on something kind of big, a big mistake like that? Does context matter?
Yeah, of course context matters. Like, let's say if it was a car crash, like maybe you'll be more sympathetic because maybe something gone wrong. But it was a car crash caused by drunk driving or like something like that. Maybe you'll be, less sympathetic.
Mm.
Of course context matters. It matters in like, everything.
Right.
So
But yeah, we're not trying to discount your failure at all. But some there are serious. There's more some failures is more serious than others. We're not trying to discount that. We're just saying for everyday failures that we go through as life, right? Something natural. We're not forcing failures. Right? We're not doing anything wrong, right? That's just naturally going through life. Those failures we can accept, and those failures we need to know how to look forward and how to grow from that. Which honestly, we will talk about next week. How to grow from your failures, because if you never grow from failures, as I said again, you're insane. I'm sorry. Probably insane is not the right word, but there's something that you're not. If you're not growing from it, then you're losing a very valuable lesson. You're losing a valuable point if you're not growing from it. Yeah. So with that being said, I think we've come to the end of our segment today. Thank you guys for listening. And Ezra, would you like to talk about the small group for a second?
Oh, yeah. So if you guys don't know, we run a kind of support group to help kind of grow an intimate community of people that, especially during the pandemic when, you know, talking with people, hanging out has become more of a like a chore than anything. We kind of wanted to bring back that kind of interaction and social interaction that we miss. And so, if you guys are interested, we will have an interest form down below where you guys can sign up. We hold meetings weekly every Sunday at 4 p.m. Yeah, and we hope to see you guys there.
All right. Well, that concludes today's podcast. Thank you guys for listening. I hope you guys learned something from our discussion about failures. And yeah, I hope to see you guys next week. Bye, guys.
Bye.